better leave it here, yeah, just in case.
If you'll rise, we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Here, let's do it over here. We're going to face the flag, put our hand on our chest, and we'll go. Go ahead.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you guys are awesome. Thank you very much. I suspect we're going to see more of them over the evening and the years. All right. I guess I kind of got that out of order. Nope, we did adjourn closed session. So next thing up on the agenda tonight is the approval of the agenda for this evening.
I move the board adopt the agenda as presented.
Second. Thank you. Heather?
Andy?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kim Marie? Yes. AJ?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. And now for Dallas Ackerman, honoring excellence.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are going to recognize a few students that could join us. You may have heard about, I forgot, he gave me one instruction and I forgot to do it, and that was to turn the mic on. But we're going to recognize some students that recently achieved through this Liberty Area Chamber of Commerce program, 20 Under 20. Liberty's next generation of innovators. They received these awards earlier this semester. I know Colleen Jones, our Director of College and Career Readiness, was heavily involved with this. I asked Colleen to come up and just speak for a minute or so, and then we will recognize the students that could join us here this evening. Also, I left a printout of the detailed summary of each of these incredible students this evening. So, Colleen?
Recently, the Liberty Area Chamber of Commerce recognized individuals under the age of 20 that had made a positive impact in the Liberty area through exceptional entrepreneurship, leadership, innovation, or creative vision. These individuals either started their own business, founded a nonprofit, created a charity event, or have given back to the community in an extraordinary way. The initiative is called 20 Under 20, and the qualifications include living within the Liberty Public Schools boundary lines, be 20 on or be 20 or under on December 31st, 2017, demonstrate leadership through organizing a business, nonprofit, or community initiative that makes an impact on the greater community and serves as a positive example to other young people, must have clearly initiated business, nonprofit, or community endeavor or accomplishment. This Chamber of Commerce initiative supports the Liberty Public Schools Vision 2020 Entrepreneurial Aspirations component as well. Nominations were submitted in the fall. All of the submissions were made from someone other than the person themselves. So here are a few of the honorees.
Thank you, Colleen. And we have certificates made up for all of our nominees. And the ones that could not be here, we had a few prior commitments. It's a busy time of year, obviously. But there are a few here with us this evening, and we appreciate them coming, many with their parents, and we appreciate all of their support. I'd like to present Mr. Mitchell Neff, if you'd come forward. Congratulations. Let's give him a round of applause. Gary Davidson. Gary, are you? Yep, Gary's in the back. Come on up, Mr. Davidson.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Addison Moffett. Congratulations. There you go. Good job. And last but not least, Mr. Adam Larson. Adam. Good job. I also wanted to make mention of those that could not be here tonight, and those include Fiona Burrows, C.J. Joplin, Owen Adrian, Emily Black, Parker Sims, and Grant Houston. So let's give them a round of applause as well. Again, we will be sure to get these certificates presented to them here hopefully tomorrow before we break for spring break. So that concludes Honoring Excellence for tonight. Appreciate your attention.
Thanks, Alice.
In just a few minutes, we will take a break and congratulate all the honorees. Before we do that, we'd just like to recognize the people who have filed for the Board of Education Director positions in the upcoming election. I'll state your name and then if you could please stand. First, Nick Bartlow, Kent Peterson, and David Evans. Thank you.
All right, we are going to break here just for a few minutes. If you want to speak during public comment, there should be blue cards outside the room that you can complete and get it back to me or one of the board members, and then we'll give you an opportunity to speak during public comment. But we will take a brief, let's say, 6-minute break so that we're looking at the 20 after to get back to the meeting. present and accounted for. What fun. Next item is public comment. Did anyone get a blue card? No blue cards? Going, gone. All right. That brings us to the consent agenda for this evening. And our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Most of the items listed under the consent agenda have gone through board subcommittee review and recommendation. Documentation concerning these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member.
I move the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 to 6.04.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, Sandra?
Andy,
Yes.
Kent,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
AJ,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, so that brings us to board policy updates, and we have a couple of policy revisions for this evening.
Yeah, and you are familiar with these, and that these are being brought to you this evening for consideration here on second read. As a reminder, IGBD deals with at-risk students, IKF, graduation requirements, JHD, student guidance and counseling, and JHDF, suicide awareness and prevention. So those are presented to you this evening for your consideration.
We've seen these before. Any questions or comments on these items before we adopt them?
I move the board adopt policies IGBD, IKF, JHD, and JHDF.
Second.
All right, Sandra?
Andy,
Yes.
Kent,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
AJ,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
motion carries.
Is this accurate? On to new business?
Yes, very seldom do we not have unfinished business, so I would say we're caught up. That's not true, because we'll soon take item number 9.01 and turn that into unfinished business as we continue through the spring conversations regarding budget planning for the 2018-19 school year. So what you have presented to you under this item this evening, under 9.01, are district compensation plans for the next school year. So you have several attachments. You have the memorandum from myself to the Board of Education kind of spelling out the recommendations that were presented by Team Liberty, as well as the Administrative Salary and Welfare Committee. And I want to draw your attention to that initial document, the memorandum, but then you have the accompanying pieces that are related to certified, classified, extra duty, miscellaneous rates of pay, professional technical schedules, in terms of the actual compensation plans. So to hit the high points that we're presenting to you this evening for first read, we'll see again and offer opportunity for conversation at our April study session, but then you'll see it again at the regular April monthly meeting. To run through these, as far as the initial fund salary schedule, vertical and horizontal movements for all eligible employees for 2018-19, the anticipated cost for that is $1,297,760. And then you can see additional recommendations tied to the certificated salary schedule, which includes $2,000 to the base, a cell, as well as additional targeted areas within the schedule. As it relates to classified salary schedule recommendations, an enhancement to the tune of about 3.11%. Professional technical salary schedule, that same percentage applied. Enhancement to administrative salary schedules, 3.11%. And then a one-time enhancement to the tune of $1,500 to employees currently on step 25 of the certificated salary schedule. And then pay grade adjustments based on our equity analysis conducted by Human Resources annually. So all of that totals to a recommendation looking forward of $3,088,142. So greatly appreciate the work of Team Liberty and the countless hours that they put into kind of working through a variety of scenarios to get us to this point of the conversation as it relates to budgeting and planning for the coming school year. In addition, Dr. Vogelaar and his team, Cindy Sullivan and her team, getting the data to the team so that they can make informed decisions regarding these recommendations that then come to me, but then are then passed along to the Board of Education. To give you a little sense of our timeline moving forward, again, presented to you this evening for first read, our hope is to be able to, over the course of the next 2 meetings, come back to our April 17th, 2018 meeting for consideration by the board and that recommendation to be presented. So we'll have time between now and then for additional clarification, additional questions. Here in a little bit, we're going to be looking at budget planning as it relates to revenues in the month of March and expenditures in the month of April. And then come May, we'll have a draft budget document prepared for you. So this is one of those important pieces in getting across the finish line, as we know is required by statute by the end of the month of June. So presented to you for first read. Bob or Cindy, anything to add as far as additional information, clarification?
That's good.
Okay. Cindy?
Nothing else.
All right.
Lots of line items.
A lot of line items, a lot of data. The other piece, thinking about all of the implications, not just within the next fiscal year, but as you project out. And so you've seen some of the district's forecasting documents and those projection spreadsheets, which by adjusting one item here and there, you obviously see that kind of trickle effect as it looks to 3 years from now, 5 years from now. So always kind of keeping an eye on the immediate impact in the coming fiscal year, but then subsequent impact as it relates to 3 to 5 years down the road. So again, thank you to everyone that was helpful in participating in this process. Okay.
Any questions at this point before we move on the agenda? Hearing none. Contracts and purchases.
Under 9.02, we do have 2 items that we wanted to bring to your attention. One is a contract with Apple Incorporated. Been working through the process over the course of the last couple of months. We did share this information previously with you in a Friday update, but contract presented to you for the lease purchase to provide iPads for grades K through 2 to assist with elementary project Lead the Way, as well as kindergarten through 5th grade teachers and MacBook Air devices to accommodate student growth. The fiscal note for this is over a 3-year period, 3 annual payments of $566,190 as it relates to this particular contract presented to you for your consideration.
Any questions on the?
So these iPads are going to be treated the same as they have in the past, or is this going to be one-to-one? Because weren't there iPads in the past shared?
And Trey's here. You want to provide some clarification on that, Trey, in terms of as far as the use of the devices for iPads grades K through 2?
Is there any change from the past practices with these, or is it the same amount? Okay.
Yeah. Other questions?
I move the board approve the contract with Apple.
Second?
Thanks. Henry?
Andy?
Yes.
Kent?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And one other item.
We do have another item for you in respect to audit services and a request for proposal that we put out recently. The results from that particular proposal, appreciate Cindy and company working on that to be able to vet through an interview process to get us to an agreement that we're putting forward to you with Westbrook and Company, who is kind of the incumbent, and we've been working with them for a number of years. The specifics of the agreement are spelled out for you as it relates to its terms, but would present that to you for your consideration this evening. Anything to add, Cindy, as far as your experience in the RFP process? Or
I felt real good about the process. The interviews went well. We're very thankful that all 4 companies could come in and interview. Westbrook was by and large heads-up favorite of the whole group just because of the interview process and what they can bring to the table for us. We also ran this by the Audit Finance Committee, and they were also in favor of bringing Westbrook back again. So across the board, I feel very good with this recommendation to bring them back for 5 more years.
And they continue to change who's doing audit of various functions?
Yes, they will continue to change staff and rotate what they do as far as what they look at in the district, and as we have requested that they do, so that we have fresh eyes on all phases of the district business.
So then the timeline for that, moving forward, in terms of the recommendation for the board, if the recommendation is board approved, we'll enter into a new 5-year audit service agreement that will then be brought to you for your approval at the April 17th regular board meeting. So that's kind of the timeline for that as well. So, okay.
All right. That takes us to administrative reports.
The first one, under 10.01 for academic services, Dr. Heidi.
Thank you. Academic Services is working on visioning, as we have had student focus group panels being conducted for over the last few weeks. About half of our secondary panels have happened already. We will start our elementary panels over the next month. Likewise, we've had a parent advisory board that has taken place in regard to helping us vision our future focus on career pathways, specifically in regard to business. We appreciate all these panels as they help guide the direction of our programming, our personalization, and our innovation as we move forward. College and Career Readiness, led by Colleen Jones, hosted over 750 high school juniors from Liberty North and Liberty High School as they participated in the financial literacy simulation called Future Finance, and some of you helped with that. Thank you very much. Over 220 spots were filled by 90 volunteers, some for 90-minute sessions and some all day long. We really appreciate the volunteers that helped make that happen for our 750 juniors that went through the process. Here are a few quotes from students that are fun to think about. I like how the people at the tables acted like this was real life. I didn't realize the high costs and how much it costs to live as an adult. I learned budgeting and credit scores are important. Education's kind of important to have, and wow, I appreciate my parents. Some feedback from our adult volunteers. There are both internal and external obstacles that must be overcome to change the culture of education, which I believe has to happen to see real progress in the way we develop and deliver our curriculum. Future Finance is just one of these programs. So again, we really, really appreciate that feedback and guidance as we continue to do programs like that, and truly appreciate the work that all of our directors do, and specifically with Future Finance that Colleen Jones and her department runs. And then finally, our secondary study team will be having their second meeting April 12th. They're being led by Dr. Julie Moore as they deeply dive into visioning and innovation and high school programming as they think about the future. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions for academics?
I would just like to say, I happened to volunteer. It was amazing. You guys did a great job of putting so many things together. And it was, you have to act like it's real. Otherwise, the high schoolers don't believe you. So it was, they were interesting. The students were interesting. Their comments were interesting. And some of them were just like, I don't have any money left. I can't do this now. I can't have a phone.
They get kind of
That's not
upset
going to really happen.
sometimes.
I know. So it was very interesting.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Heidi. Next up is Finance, Ms. Sullivan.
Here. While I'm doing this, I did want to point out on my report tonight on the operating cash flow. It appears flat this month, and that is due to not receiving TIF money at the same time we did last year. So we're a month behind. So it appears flat. Next month it will take a pretty good leap up because we did receive our TIF money on Tuesday, $7.4 million. So you will see cash flow, operating cash flow go back to normal next month. But that's the first time we've really had a blip of timing differences show up on this report, but everything is normal and fine. So wanted to point that out to you. Also in my report, before we talk about budget development, I wanted to mention that Audit and Finance Committee did review the financials this month and had nothing to report to you. They are scheduled to have a meeting on Monday, April 16th at 5:30 in this room. So with that, we're going to talk tonight quickly, hopefully, about budget development and the revenue side. It's been a very slow gathering of data this year. The state has been busy with other things and haven't really gotten around to putting out a lot about what's going on in the budget world, but we'll talk about what we do know as we journey through this PowerPoint. Tonight we're also going to go through the budget development process very quickly and the accounting code structure just as a refresher what that means and what the elements of the accounting code is. So when you look at the finances and the financial statements, that you will have a little bit of a basis as a refresher to see what you're looking at. And then we'll talk about operating revenue, capital revenue, and debt service preliminary projections. The budget development process from year to year is pretty standard. June through July, we make monthly budget amendments. Then beginning in January through May, we have budget meetings with leaders. We have our budget presentations March through April. We present you the preliminary draft budget in May, and then in June you will adopt the budget document as per statute. Accounting code structure. You will see two bars up here. The current accounting code structure is on the top, and it consists of 5 sets of numbers. And we'll talk about each one of these in a minute a little bit deeper. Also note that we've talked a little bit about the new code structure change that's coming in 18-19, and the difference is the green box that they're adding a source of funds for 18-19. So next year when we start looking at this, it will be a little bit different, and we can talk more about that when we roll those changes out in December. We are not rolling those changes out into December because of wrapping up the current year. We will be required in our current system to pull using the old codes to complete our ASBR and all of our final expenditure reports. So we don't want to change to the new coding until we've completely wrapped up the audit and all of our required reporting to DESE. So you will still see the current coding system and the financials through December, and then we'll switch over to the new ones. So they'll look a bit different, but not to where it's very difficult for you to see what's going on, but we will talk about that. The elements of the accounting code consist of the fund, the function, the object, the location, and the project. Each of those elements tell you something, and I'm going to not read this to you. This is there for you if you want to go back and look at it as you're looking at financial statements. The most common question I get are the fund types. You often hear funds referred to as buckets. So we have 4 buckets, a general fund, a teacher fund. Both of those together combine what we know as the operating fund, and debt service and capital projects. And it tells you there what they're used for. Break it down a little further, you may also hear them called by alternate names, incidental, special revenue. They have DESE fund numbers, they have Liberty fund numbers. You may hear them refer to all of these things at any one time. We also have sub-funds. Those are funds that roll up into other funds, student activities. You will hear us talk about student activities. It's a sub-fund of the operating fund. When we report to DESE, they are collapsed together. The same will be for the bond fund. If the bond passes on April 3rd, then we will have a Fund 44 that we will report out separately to you, but for reporting purposes for DESE, it will be collapsed all into Fund 4 and capital projects. So that there's a lot of components there that wrap up into all of those funds. Function types, this is just a brief description. Yes, sir.
Okay. So just for clarification, there's 4 basic funds.
Right.
And there's the reason for it is there's rules about when you can
Correct.
move money from one fund to the
Yes.
other, right?
Certain things can only, and you see in the buckets, certain things can only be paid for or put into each of these funds. General fund and teacher fund are the operating accounts of the district. That's what we pay salaries and day-to-day bills out of. We have a piece of the tax levy that goes into the general operating fund. We have a debt service bucket. That's what we pay bond, principal, and interest fund from. We have a debt service levy also that's statutorily required to pay off this debt service and pay off the debt that we incur from bonds and borrowing. And capital projects, we have a certain amount that we can put into capital projects through revenue from the classroom trust fund and from the levy. As you know, back in 2011, we put a 36-cent levy in capital projects to pay for the one-to-one technology leases. So the revenue is required to go in there. The payments for the leases are required to come out of there. So we have to keep those funds separate in those buckets based on requirements of DESE and accounting requirements.
Thanks.
Function types, this describes the action, the purpose, or the program that we are making an expenditure for, and this is the second set of numbers in the accounting code. And if you come across just a code without an account description, you can see that if it's on a 1,000, it goes for instruction, but it's very easy to break down what the program is that an expenditure is paying for. Object types, we have revenue objects, which are the 5,000, and expenditure objects, which are the 6,000. They describe the services and the commodities that we obtain. Revenues are also, you can see it's a 51, a 52, and that also goes to further break down the source between local, county, state, and federal, and other revenues. So it gets a little more detailed. When DESE updates the coding in 18 and 19, the source code will take on that 1, 2, 3, or 4 also to denote whether it's from local, county, state, there we go, or federal. So that will be one more delineator on the new coding system. Expenditures, 6,100s are salaries, 6,200s are benefits, and so forth. So when you see a code, you will know what it's being spent on. So that's just a brief overview of the funds accounting. And if you have questions, we can sit down and talk about that further in depth. But I did want to provide you just a little bit of an overview of how fund accounting works before we move on. We're going to talk now about the operating revenue and the preliminary projections. We're going to talk tonight about the 3 largest pieces of our revenue budget and operating. That would be local property tax, Proposition C sales tax, and the state foundation formula. Local tax revenue, this represents approximately 30% of our operating budget. I spoke with the assessor's office a couple of weeks ago. It is not in a reassessment year, but they do feel that we will be right in line for our projected 2.5% increase on our AV, our assessed valuation. We will not know that until the final assessed valuation is delivered in August when we set the tax levy. We do know that the consumer pricing index in December rose to 2.1%, so we will be limited to any increase we can show in our revenue of 2.1%, but with new construction and increased property values, a 2.5% increase in revenue is realistic. Operating tax levy is 4.7943 per $100 of assessed valuation. We currently are realizing a collection rate of 98.74%, and we do budget on that collection rate. I've included at the bottom, just for your information, how the county assesses property values, personal property, commercial, real estate, residential real estate, and agriculture. So you've heard talk about that. Obviously, commercial real estate is 32%, and that's the one that we make the most money off of as a city at the highest rate, or as a district at the highest rate. And as you've heard probably in Dr. Tucker's State of the District, Our personal property represents 21% of our assessed valuation. Commercial property is 17.5%, but when you remove the tip, it's down to about 7.7%. Residential is 78%. So the largest piece of our local tax revenue comes from residential real estate. We have about 0.3% in our agriculture. And let me mention that local tax increase for next year's budget is about $1.08 million increase over the current year. Proposition C, sales tax. Proposition C originated in 1982. It's a 1-cent sales tax. It benefits schools and highway funds. And we receive the money based on our weighted average daily attendance. We are estimating a $216,000 increase in that this year based on revenue that's projected to increase in that sales tax. And that revenue works out to be $1,006 per weighted average daily attendance. Basic formula classroom trust fund. This represents about 40% of our operating revenue. We are estimating an increase right now, based on the facts that we know, of about $1 million in our budget. That assumes a state adequacy target of $6,241, which is the current state adequacy target. The governor is proposing in his budget a recommended $51 million add to the DESE K-12 budget, and that's enough to keep the state adequacy target flat. Now, the House has recommended full funding, which is $98 million, which would take the SAT up to $6,308. But that has not moved out of the House. The Senate hasn't spoken to it, so we're kind of at a standstill as to knowing what to budget for this number. So we have chosen conservatively, since it's so much of our revenue, to keep it flat. We know with the governor's recommendation that we can be pretty confident that it will at least remain what it is right now. Budget has to be approved, I believe, at May 4th. So hopefully between now and then, we will know more as to whether we need to adjust this up or remain flat until we hear more. So, like I said, it's been slow getting information out of the government this year as far as how to budget for this. So that's what we've decided to do. It also includes an increased weighted average daily attendance of 122 students, which is growth times our attendance rate. So we get a little bit of increase for that as well. So overall, this is what I'm planning right now with the information that I have for our operating revenue budget. So you can see the increase in operating revenue of about $2.8 million. If we didn't talk about it, it's because it's remaining pretty flat, or it's a minimal increase and it's not one of our high revenue generating categories. Other local would include investment earnings, nutrition services, kids zone and student activities, and it's staying pretty flat. County revenue, fines, and state assessed utilities have a small increase. And state other would be transportation, early childhood, and high need fund reimbursement, which are all based on prior years, this current year, actual expenditures, and will be fully funded because that's statutorily required. So we won't know until September what they are when we wrap up the final expenditure reports for the year, and then we will adjust the budget with budget amendments as we do every year. Any questions on the operating side of things?
Proposition C, it just applies to sales tax? Is that, and that's statewide?
It's a statewide 1% sales tax.
And so do we just get the funds that are collected in our district then?
Yes.
And that only applies to sales, that does not apply over to use tax?
Correct. And it's distributed between the districts based on our average daily attendance, weighted average daily attendance.
Okay.
Any other questions on the operating? There will, In May, when we talk about the draft budget, we will have updates, so I will let you know what has changed from this and how it has affected the budget. At this point, I would assume that if anything, it will go up, revenue will increase based on what we find out from the state and the state basic formula and the classroom trust fund. So this would probably be worst case scenario at this point, how we're looking at things. And it's not worst case, it's just as low as I would anticipate.
It's conservative.
Conservative, that's true. Next, we're going to talk about the capital revenue preliminary budget. And we have an overall decrease of about $1.1 million in the capital revenue budgeted right now. That consists of decreases due to Building Pride campaign contributions that were made one time. So the big push for donations all happened last year. We still have the incoming ongoing revenue for sponsorships, but it's not as large as what the one-time contributions were. And we also, that is a decrease. We have an increase that offsets that decrease for the sale of technology. The old units that we have refreshed, we did take and were able to sell them, and we made about $896,000 on the sale of old units last year that we will not have this coming year. So both of those combined led to a decrease in the capital revenue of about $1.1 million. We did see a property tax revenue increase of $81,000 just because of an increase in assessed valuation. Other things stayed pretty flat within the capital budget, so that's what we anticipate for capital. And debt service then, much the same. We have local property taxes. The levy is 1.3007 that goes into debt service. That increase would be $293,000, a little over that. We do have a decrease in interest that offsets that. We paid off in March that crossover bond refunding. While we had those funds, we were earning good interest on that. But since we paid it off, we do not have that money in the bank anymore, so we will not be gaining as much interest next year since that refunding has been paid off. And that's going to cause the debt service revenue to shrink by about $138,000. Other than that, everything is pretty stable in the debt service account.
But the high interest rate we were paying on the old bond is also gone.
Correct. Absolutely. Any questions on this one? So that's what I have for you tonight. If I can answer any other questions or try to provide any other clarification, I'd be glad to do it.
See you in a month.
See you in a month.
I don't have a question, but just a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, not even for you, just for people watching or in the audience. The document that Cindy went through is also available through the district website, through Board Docs, if anyone wants to go back and look at it again. It's
Yes,
all
it is
all
posted.
publicly available.
Yes, it is.
And very nicely done.
Just a
Thank you.
reminder in how we used to approach that when we did our budget retreat in June, and deciding that rather than one retreat setting, be able to chunk it out, for lack of a better word, and do the revenue piece, the expenditure piece, and then the draft budget piece, so that we can spend a little bit more time on each of those areas. And then I know Scott's recommendation a while back was to kind of create the Finance 101 as far as a refresher for fund accounting and what the various buckets look like. So appreciate Cindy and her team kind of refining that each year. So well done.
Thank you.
Unless there are additional questions for finance, next up is Human Resources. Dr. Vogelaar.
Thank you very much. We've uploaded a report for you to look at. I want to highlight just one item out of it. It's with regard to our wellness screenings. As you know, this is the season when our employees have the opportunity to participate in a health risk assessment and a screening survey, and we've got 983 of our employees already signed up for 1,392 slots, and that's 70.6% this year. That's a lot. That's high for this time of year. As you know, by the time the season ends, we try to get as close to 100% as we can, and we're typically around 97, 98% participation rates in these events. So I'm very encouraged to see the response rate as it is. We'll continue that through the spring. The appointments obviously go now all the way through the beginning of May, so there's lots of time to fill in the rest of those remaining spots. There's a lot of other information there. If you have any questions, we'd be glad to entertain those questions at this time.
Anything for Dr. Vogelar? Thank you. Next up, Mr. Anderson, Operations.
Thank you. 2 items. One, just a quick update on construction. Not much change from last month in terms of the anticipated completion dates at the 3 active projects. Liberty North, the concession stand donor wall is still on schedule for early May, so about May 4th, May 5th. Liberty High School, the middle part of the month, so about May 17th. And then the Academy, early June, so June 6 or 7. You're starting to see the Academy starting to kind of pull together right now, and then once that gets sealed up, they'll move really quickly inside. Also, I'd like to just give a quick overview and highlight of the capital plan that we just kind of finalized here recently. We sent this out last Friday or the week before, I believe. Just real quickly, 560 requests that were submitted or rolled from the previous years. We went ahead and we selected 221 of those requests with a total estimated budget all in of just over $5 million. So that correlated with what Cindy just shared. Quick highlights, a lot of the work is taking place on the carpet, flooring, HVAC, roofing. We also have some pretty significant investment in playgrounds improvements and some renovation projects at some of the libraries. Some cafeteria work, and a pretty sizable chunk of that is with technology. We have also set aside some funds for tennis courts as part of that project, so we have a kind of a set aside or allowance for that while we continue to work toward that project. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions for Operations? Thanks, Mr. Anderson. Last item then under the administration reports would be some additions to the document I've provided in my superintendent's report. First of all, I wanted to congratulate all of the recipients for Support Staff of the Year as well as Teacher of the Year. We've had both of those kind of award recognitions over the last couple of weeks since our last board meeting. That's pretty indicative of where we are at this time of year with end-of-year activities and celebrations. We're going to welcome our retirees to the district tomorrow for a retirees breakfast, which this year is going to include, for those interested, a tour of the district. For those that have perhaps not been around here lately or a few years removed, we're going to hit a couple of sites, so we're excited about bringing them into our schools and interacting and engaging with kids. A couple of updates at the state level. From a DESE standpoint, we really have no change as it relates to a fully functioning state board of education, and that we still have some vacancies there that preclude them from actually having a meeting because they don't have a quorum. Secondly, we're still in flux as it relates to Commissioner of Education and that vacancy that still exists. So we'll continue to provide updates as that information is provided out of the state level. The other thing that I would mention is that we've been walking through this process of revising the Missouri School Improvement Plan process, which kind of dictates our accountability and accreditation system. We are on the 6th iteration of that, or getting ready to enter into the 6th iteration of that. And so we should be seeing at the end of this semester kind of a draft of the MSIP 6 iteration guidelines and what that will look like for school districts across the state as it relates to accountability, accreditation. A follow-up piece will be the question as to how does assessment look in the state of Missouri. So we're participating with the Missouri Assessment Consortium, but at the same time, we're also participating in the assessment task force that has been put together by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So more to come as that guideline is revealed in the draft, as well as opportunity to provide feedback and comments. The third area I wanted to mention was something that Cindy teed up as it relates to the federal budget. Had the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. earlier this week, and there was a pretty important hearing on the Hill as it related to the Department of Education and Secretary DeVos laying out her proposed budget for public education in the entire nation. And in that hearing, she conveyed a couple of key things. One, as it relates to title programming and continued allocation of funds for title programming. expansion of school choice opportunities, both through the federal budget, but then also some pass-through options that states might be able to elect to spend a portion of their title funds towards school choice efforts. And then the last category, which was really kind of the most important, and that there's a lot of conversation across the country as it relates to safety and security, the federal role, the state role, but then also local school districts in ensuring that we provide safe and secure schools for all of our students as well as our faculty and staff. This is kind of the initial step as they look to the budget and looking at the future and kind of taking it through the Congress and then eventually on into the President for consideration. So we'll continue to watch that. And then the final thing that I had this evening is as a reminder to everyone, I know our kids know this, but just as a reminder, spring break is next week. So enjoy spring break, and when we get back, we'll be turning the corner into April, which then brings into mind kind of that assessment window as it relates to state and end-of-year assessments. So I'd certainly open it up for any questions that you all have of me.
Lots going on.
Busy time. Yeah. So that concludes our administration reports.
Anything else? All right, upcoming meetings. We have a study session April 3rd, early in the morning. And then, Angie, you're going to NSBA?
Kimberly and I are.
Okay.
We're excited.
National School Boards Association.
Ideas to bring back.
We'll be texting.
All right, and then next regular meeting on April 17th at 7 p.m. So
The May regular meeting, not that I'm asking for action or anything tonight, but I would like us to discuss maybe moving that to Thursday of that week if it works for everybody. Dr. Tucker and I would have a conflict that our daughters would like us to resolve for that night if it works for enough people.
That's true.
okay.
If you can send out an email or something to check availability.
We could do that, yeah.
If we could.
If I may add to that also, the call for presentations for MSBA deadline is March 30th, which is next week.
All right. Have there been any learning rounds that people have attended in the last few weeks? There was a flurry of them in January and February.
I think we're caught up on those as well. I believe so.
All right. Any board remarks as we wrap up here this evening? All right. That's the board adjourned.
Second.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Angie.
I'm just helping my friend out here.
I think we're all in.
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
AJ?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all.